Can everyone hear me?
Can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, just making sure my microphone on these headphones works. I believe we have at least four of us here, myself, Rich, Larry, and Alan. So we can call the meeting to order at 6:46 p.m.
And Melody, you
Elsa,
also have Trustee Sterling. Yeah, Trustee Sterling,
Oh, and
hopefully
Nicole.
drinking hot
Welcome,
chocolate.
Nicole.
Yeah.
hello everyone.
All right. And the first thing is that Alan was wondering if we could talk about rights of nature first, and then move on to our other agenda items. And I just wanted to know if everybody was okay with that before doing it.
Fine with me.
I have no objection.
All right. So we have another draft back from the attorney of the rights of nature establishing guardians resolution that we were working on. There's a link draft in there in the agenda. And so our discussion is, at this point, do we approve it? Is there anything else we want to edit on it? And I'll leave it up to maybe you, Alan, to introduce this if you can. Or if anybody else wants to chime in on anything they saw in the document, feel free.
I think Ellen is frozen, or is he?
Yeah.
It's gone dark on my screen.
Let me see if I can get more light on. How's everybody doing?
Well, Alan, do you have anything to say about the rights of nature resolution? I mean, as a way of sort of introducing it, or where?
Well, we've discussed it several times. I don't know if there's anything else we need to say other than the fact that Tom Mawald is no longer on SAB. He's not our liaison anymore. So he wouldn't be appropriate as a guardian. Rich was listed as an alternate. So if he's willing to be a fellow guardian, then we could just put Rich and I in as guardians, and I think it's good to go.
I'm certainly willing to do that.
Great, thanks, Rich. Does anybody have any questions about it?
The only thing I see is I'm just wondering if the report every 12 months is a little overly ambitious and maybe it should be every other year, like every 24 months, but that's just a passing thought.
Yeah, well, we could say approximately every 12 months.
I like that.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question about who's going to do the heavy lifting of the research. The idea of, even if others are generating the basic data, and there's plenty out there, but somebody has to gather it together and put it in a format, uh, present it, save it on Google Docs, I guess. So I'm just wondering who does that. And I can imagine the BOT would ask that very question.
Well, that's what the guardians are.
So
We're going to be organizing the information. I'm planning to personally get in touch with the key people with the state and the county and the city of Boulder and then report into you folks, SAB, as we get information, and then save that information for annual comprehensive report. But the people who will really be doing the research, so to speak, are those that have the staff and the experts, which is the state and the county and the city of Boulder.
Well, excuse me for being kind of, I don't know, like worst case scenario on this, but why not? Because that's what could happen. To me, worst case scenario is somebody reads this resolution in, let's say, a citizen of Nederland, and this person decides that a certain action needs to be explored more. And this person comes to us and says, hey, this resolution, and I have this concern, and I want it to be researched.
Then
And
we
suppose just to finish, suppose it's a legitimate request. I mean, that it is, it's not like you go, oh, this is nutcase. No. So then, but, I'm speaking from experience with this kind of thing. So I'm not making this up.
I think it's a good thing, and I'd say great. I'm glad people are paying attention. Bring it on. We'll do what we can to gather the information.
So
That's
will
the
you
whole-
be,
that's the whole
Alan,
idea.
the point person? I guess that's what, and it has to be, well, it could be two, I guess, you and Rich, but in other words, there's going to have to be somebody, even at the level of emails going back and forth, where, you will get put in touch with this person and you will be expected to respond. Absolutely. So I guess I'm asking is, are you ready for that if it happens? And if you think about it actually in a certain way, you want this to happen.
I wouldn't
We
have proposed
want the
this. I
community
wouldn't
to
have
come
proposed
forward.
this in the first place if I didn't expect this to be a community conversation.
Okay, so I can put in the notes then, can I? I guess I'm asking that you will, let's say you, or Rich, but let's say you will oversee the project, the research project in all respects, something like that. So that means it's you.
That's why we're called guardians.
Well, but your name is going to be, you see what I'm getting at? It's not guardians, it's like you. I mean, you're the guardian, you and
That's
Rich.
why I volunteered for this, and that's why my name's on the resolution.
Okay, but I haven't heard that up till now. And this is why I'm asking these questions. It's like the follow through. So that's all I have to say on this. If you're, and Rich, I guess, are willing to oversee the project in all respects, the research, then I love this and I want to thank you.
Larry, one thing I would say is I would expect the creation of the report to be transparent. And I would probably talk to Alan about offering public comment before it's finalized, and then putting public comments, pro, con, crazy, whatever they are, in the report so that we have everybody's input. Whether it's an appendix or how we would do it, I'm not sure, but I do think that the public's thoughts on it would be important to include.
Absolutely. It needs to be a completely transparent public process throughout. We will, and when Rich and I have a formal meeting, we will publicize it. And even though we don't have to, because it's not they're just two of us, but we'll welcome input. And I hope we get some and hope we have people interested because it's our ecosystem. We depend on it.
I had a quick question, being the new person here. Are any of these things like what you've outlined of things that you want to accomplish and, things like looking at water quality or wildlife habitat and corridors, are any of these things addressed in other areas or other grants or anything? Maybe this is something for Miranda. If, yeah, or if it, I'm guessing also though that you're bringing this together in this resolution because you are seeing a gap. A little history would be helpful.
Well, as I've said, Nicole, other entities have the expertise to gather this information, and we will be in touch with them, both governmental entities and non-governmental organizations, to help us with this task. So, you know, this is the beginning of a process, and we'll find out what's out there, who's doing what, and what information is available. You know, there's people like the Colorado Division of Wildlife, for example. We can talk to them and see, get their take on wildlife issues if somebody's interested in wildlife issues. They have people who monitor this part of Boulder County. So yeah, I think it's an exciting initiative, and I hope we find out a lot of interesting information. And if there are gaps in our knowledge, then we'll try to work with people who have expertise, whether they're people I mentioned, and maybe there are people at CU or CSU or Colorado Division of Wildlife, et cetera. There are a lot of people doing a lot of good work who have a lot of expertise that we do not have. But it will be fun to, you know, put our heads together and see what's out there and what's going on and what there is that can be done. But, you know, as Larry put an email out earlier saying that we have a climate crisis in progress, we do. And it's going to be ongoing, and it's going to have an impact on our ecosystem. And that's going to be an issue. You know, we've already got reports that we have species being decimated. And the pike is one in Rocky Mountain National Park that's had major impacts. I don't know, I've never seen any pikas over this way up in our part of the watershed, but there may very well be some up high. So there's one species we know about that's threatened. And I think, you know, maybe as this goes along, there'll be an opportunity to, you know, if you, Nicole, or anybody else wants to know about wildlife issues, we have one of our meetings and turn it into a public forum and have someone like the Colorado Division of Wildlife come and talk to us about issues they see coming at us with respect to the impacts that climate change is going to have on local species. I can tell you that I see a lot of healthy deer populations and moose and elk. And I see foxes and I see coyotes, but I don't know what else is out there and what's going on. You know, and there are some local people with good expertise, like that live in Eldora. So we do have experts among us. Anyway, I think it's an exciting initiative, and I'm looking forward to working on this and gathering information, and hopefully we'll have a lot of public interest and participation. But please bring on any questions or concerns, and I'll look forward to working with everybody in SAB and BOT and Nederland and Boulder County and anyone who's interested.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Can public comment here or not?
Absolutely. Please identify yourself, and
Yeah, my
we
name
welcome your
is
comments.
Cameron. I'm a resident and a landowner in town. So I'm just looking at this this short resolution. It's only 2 pages. Is there another is there another document that has more details?
That's
We're
pretty
resident.
much what you see. What you see is it.
There was the original town resolution ordinance that gave legal status to the river, sort of, or the watershed as an entity, and anticipated that these river guardians would be appointed. So that's the other document. I think that might be at issue.
Okay, so there's already been a rights resolution or whatever you're calling it that has passed.
Yes, the Board of Trustees passed the Rights of Nature
Okay.
resolution,
And so this is
and that is
just about,
available through the town.
okay,
And this is
and
just appointing
I
guardians
see.
to implement the Rights of Nature
And
resolution.
maybe it's maybe I will look that up, but do you know if there's reference in that original resolution to any, like, what's the motivation for calling it rights instead of just saying that the town requires these standards of water quality and pollution to be adhered to?
I think the answer to that is it's sort of a philosophical decision.
Right, what's the
that-
philosophy? That's what I'm
The
asking.
philosophy is sort of that the river should have people that represent it, that it should have rights in and of itself. It's almost a personhood for the river. However, legally, my opinion as just a member of the board of the SAB is that it really doesn't have any legal effect. It's not like Alan and I could go and file a lawsuit on behalf of the river or something like that. It is simply a recognition that the river is, or the creek is, an important part of the community, and that needs to have a voice. That, I think, is
So
what the board was going
right,
for.
and so you're just using the strongest language possible, even though legally it might be a little squirrely.
I don't think it's squirrely
You know-
legally. It is simply irrelevant legally. It's not like the river has a right that can be enforced in court.
Got it.
It is that the town has recognized that this is an important issue, and the river, for those purposes, should be considered something with rights of its own.
Mhm.
And that if the board decided to do this, Alan and I would be sort of the point people in the town looking after the interests of the river
Got it.
from that standpoint.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, we definitely did not want to be litigating anything. It's as Rich said, it's philosophical. It expresses community values, that we value the ecosystem, we value the creek and all those tributaries, and we put value on that, and we're going to try to do everything we can to protect it, but we are not looking for litigation.
Cameron, thanks for being here. I just linked the resolution in the chat if you want to look at that.
Thanks, Erica. Yeah, and Cameron, if you're interested in this issue and want to be involved, we would welcome your participation.
Well, if there are no more comments, I'm happy to make a motion to adopt this. I'm assuming that we do need to make a new motion to adopt this new worded resolution. So I'm happy to make that motion if that's what we need to do. I'm thrilled
Before
about
someone
this.
seconds it, Miranda seems to be raising her hand.
Yeah, hi there. I just wanted to know, the attorneys asked a couple of questions to SAB, and so I just want to make sure you feel like you've addressed them or don't need to address them before you approve. There's one from Aaron asking about what criteria the guardian should fit: residents of town, residents of Boulder County, live within the watershed. He gives a series of examples and asks questions. And then also Attorney Madsen wants to understand if there's any funding needed for the preparation of the report. And if so, what does that budget look like?
I didn't think that was relevant to us passing this resolution. I think that's a different discussion.
So these are questions they had on the resolution itself, though, for ensuring clarity of the resolution. You could choose not to make any changes. I just, this is going to be the feedback that I provide to the Board of Trustees, that this was reviewed by legal, and so I think it is in your best interest to provide an answer to these questions. If you don't want to integrate it, that's fine, but to leave them unspoken to by SAB, I think will just result in the Board of Trustees kicking it back to you.
Yeah, in particular, the funding of the report, Alan, you had articulated that there are different experts that we could pull on, which is great, but if those experts need to be hired to do their analysis, that has a budgetary impact. And so that's something that we would definitely be asking about.
I didn't envision having a budget to go with it, but I think that's something that's an appropriate discussion at budget time as part of the overall town budget. What do other people in SAB think? That we should have a budget?
I don't really see a need for a budget on it. Alan and I are both volunteers and we're the primary people involved. I don't see us going and hiring people to do anything, and certainly we don't need people to hire people to write or, format the report. So I don't see a need for any type of budget.
Yeah, I don't either.
I do see the need for some language that says that in the resolution. I mean, I don't know how else to answer the attorney's very specific question, except something in the and I don't have a great phrase, but surely we can come up with one that basically says this is a non-budgeted process, something that makes it clear there's no money and that we're not going to be asking BOT for money. So I think that we need to put that in to satisfy the attorney's, query on this.
What do you think, Miranda?
Sorry, I was muted. I think, to Larry, yes, I think we need to address it. I'm also happy to address it in the AIM and just say this was feedback provided by the attorneys. SAB discussed, did not feel it was necessary. I think that's probably a better spot for it. So that's fine. I'll make a note of that. I guess the other thing, though, is just Aaron's question regarding, the guardianship. Do you want residential requirements, age requirements, other requirements? Board member, not a board member, how are they selected? I do think that will come up for some members of the board. And Nicole, if you feel differently, let me know. But I could see some more board members wanting that scoped out a little bit better of how the guardians are selected.
Well, I think what we were trying to do is define it as a member of SAB appointed by SAB, approved by the BOT. That's the process we tried to nail down and envision with this resolution.
So we'll always be a SAB board member.
SAB board member.
That's what I see written in the resolution, is that the whole board is appointed as guardians, and then the board can choose specific members of our board to then be the main guardians that enact this.
Okay. Would you
So
ever allow someone outside to submit an application, or would you expect that you would submit an application for SAB?
I think we're limiting it to SAB.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what can happen is that the subcommittee of these two members may include the help and, communication with outside community members that maybe want to jump in and be active and be a part of it. And they can be a part of that subcommittee, but the SAB is choosing SAB members to be the guardian.
Correct. Yeah, and as I said, we will welcome any community members who want to be involved in this process and work with our subcommittee. We'll take all the help we can get. We'll take all the input we can get.
Okay. I think the other things have all, they're just, well, then I guess here's one thing though. So Jennifer did suggest an odd number of committee members for decision-making purposes. By removing Tom and moving Rich in, you now don't have that odd number.
Miranda,
But
I understand that. I don't really know that we're gonna need that. I mean, even if in drafting the report, Ellen and I had a disagreement, I think we could sort of put both of our opinions in there. But if we have an odd number of members, unless the odd number is the number numeral one, any conversation we have is going to be a public meeting. And I'm not really sure I want every conversation that we have to be noticed and so forth. I think that was the thinking behind having two members and one alternate that wouldn't be there unless necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, and as well, I think if there's a disagreement between the two people that are appointed guardians, ultimately they would need to come back to then the SAB board, who is the actual guardians, and then our odd number would be able to make a decision if the two of them for some reason couldn't come together on it.
yeah, absolutely. And if somebody wants to be an alternate, speak up.
Should we have that clearly stated, though, that whatever report these specific members create has to be approved by the SAB board?
Sure. Good idea.
I like that.
Yeah. I kind of assume that, but say it, and we should. Because this is a SAB project, and we're a subcommittee of SAB, and everybody on SAB is a guardian, is part of the guardianship.
Erica, could you repeat what you just said? I didn't quite get it.
I was just
Uh,
suggesting that we put in the resolution that the SAB board must vote to approve the report that is championed by two of its members. I'm also curious if we need to have some kind of transition process, or we say two members of SAB will be allocated to this responsibility. If Alan and Rich decide they don't want to be on the SAB board, how are we going to reallocate folks to this responsibility?
Yeah, it'd be good to have that be explicit.
So I think that's one
rather
of the
than-
risks you have of listing people is every time those individuals change, you're gonna have to update your resolution.
Yeah, I don't know about the legality of this idea, but it might be a good idea to just not have the names in there and have that the members of the River Guardian Subcommittee will be appointed by the SAB.
That's a great idea.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, just remove our names.
yes, way to go. So what about Erica's suggestion about that SAB needs, what I have here, SAB must vote to approve any report. So does that need to be in the resolution or not? Or
I would suggest that the report, the language in the resolution should be that the River Guardian Subcommittee shall present a report to SAB for SAB's approval to turn over to the town board, the Board of Trustees. My thinking is, I can't really imagine much of a controversy over it. So I don't think we need to have any caveats in there, like, a minority report or something like that. So I would agree.
And it's going to the BOT. We're an advisory board, and the BOT has final approval of anything we do. Because we're an advisory board.
well, let me pose a hypothetical question. Let's suppose you bring a report on something to SAB, and you would like to forward it to BOT as part of this process. Does SAB have to do anything other than, hear the report? I mean,
Yeah,
in other words, would it be automatic, or would SAB have to, I think this is what Erica is getting at. Would SAB need to say, basically, we heard your report and we like it, or, we approve of it, prove it, and we are passing it on to BOT.
And what would be the criteria for approval would be a question that I would have.
Well, the way we approve everything is with a vote. A motion and a vote.
What's the
So, I mean,
criteria?
that's implied.
What's the criteria to say whether it approves or it doesn't approve? But I'm just curious.
It's subjective. I mean, you read the report and you decide what you think of it. Maybe SAB says, I like it, but could you give us more information on X? You know, it's an iterative process, like it is with everything we do.
All right, but why compile a report to be approved by a subjective panel?
Well, that's what
Instead of
SAB
having
works.
some objective criteria, are you doing measurements of the river? Are you checking heavy metals? Like, should the heavy metals be below a state recognized benchmark? Blah blah blah.
Well, that's why we need to get reports from our partners, like the county, the city of Boulder, the state. We don't have the ability to gather that data, but the report will include any data like that for the SAB to review.
Well,
But I
Cameron's
don't
bringing up a
think it
great
would
point,
be
though,
very
which is
very deep weeds if we were going to start setting criteria. This could go on for months. I
well,
think this particular resolution is just, you know, the way SAB works won't be any different for this than it is for anything else.
my only question is about the idea that it needs to be approved by the board. Because then you're totally right, Alan. You know, some board member could say, you know, oh, there's two different sources of data on, say, heavy metals. And I have a problem with that. And I'd like some more work done on those two sources, see which is, you know, a more trustworthy source. And at that point, then, presumably that board member would not want this report approved. And so, and it seems legitimate if that came up. And I could see this coming up big time. Wow, we are wading into highly technical areas. And I've been there, and wow, you can be overwhelmed all of a sudden. So, but what we need to be concerned about, I think, is just making sure, you know, we have our ducks in a row in terms of process. And so what Erica's bringing up, I think, is that we'd be saying, you know, the subcommittee would make a report on something, anything, and that we would want to approve it before sending it to BOT. Does that make sense to you, Alan?
Yes,
Rich?
that's the way we work. That's
Rich?
the way we work on everything.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, then, would this be in the resolution then, this sentence about or not? Or could we just have that as our own? I mean, how would that work?
I think it should
What do
be
you
in the
think?
resolution just to be neat and not, complete about it. And I would just say, you know, but prior to any report being submitted to the board, it should be approved by the SAB.
That sounds good.
Do we need to rewrite the resolution then? How do we get, I mean, I made a motion to pass what we have, and now we're wanting to amend it.
Here would be
That's
my, if you're going to make a motion to approve the resolution as amended, I think all the amendments have to be clearly recapped. Because I'm not, you know, I'm kind of taking notes as you go, but I think you need to make sure you're all on the same page about what is changing in this. Or I will tell you, I don't have it slotted to go to the Board of Trustees until December. So you could, again, do another round of cleanup here and then have it reviewed one more time prior to going to the Board of Trustees. And for me, you know, we had the challenges with the last one, right? And so I do think it's really important to make sure you have a really tight resolution before you take it over to the board.
Yeah, I would agree.
So if you were open, my recommendation would be maybe Alan, you take another swipe at this using Larry's
Okay, well,
minutes.
we have good information to enhance the resolution, and we'll bring it back at the next SAB meeting and postpone taking it to the BOT.
Could I just ask Nicole, as our, as our sitting BOT member? Hi, we're thrilled to have you on board, by the way.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. Wow. Do you have any particular thoughts on all this that we've been discussing?
Oh, thanks for asking. You know, this looks amazing and ambitious. And when I see water quality, I think, especially after our watershed, or excuse me, our wastewater visits to the wastewater facility this week, the conversation came up about forever chemicals and how are we testing for forever chemicals? Are we testing, right? Things like that, that I'm pretty passionate about and working into some of our policy moving forward. I do worry looking at this about budget because, and you know, the degree that everyone is super passionate, and however, things like this take time and they typically take like some sort of granting, some sort of grant or whatnot in order to facilitate the information. And so that's just one of my concerns without having dug into it and only having, you know, this being my really first, you know, wrestling with it. I know that other BOT members are certainly going to be asking the same question that I am, because any type of study that we're doing, whether it's traffic, whether it's, my goodness, Miranda, you know, talk to us about all the different things that we have going on. Housing, right? We have a housing, like it takes sometimes other folks to kind of to just for capacity reasons. And so that would just be one of the concerns as I'm looking at this. And yet at the same time, it's wonderful. So that would be a concern that I'd have.
Legitimate concern. Do you want us to say something about budget in the resolution, Nicole?
Well, I think like what's already been discussed, I don't know that we need to stick it in the resolution, but it does need to be something that you guys I mean, to say $0, I can just imagine that amongst some of the board members, they're gonna say, really? You know, and so I would just maybe ask us to be open to thinking about how we really, you know, how to accomplish these things. And if there is maybe in your first 12 months, and I just because I have this question, in your first 12 months, is there something specific? Like if we narrowed the scope down and you said like prioritizing everything, you know, water quality, wildlife habitat, corridors, blah, blah, blah. Is there something that you would prioritize, like the one or two things that are most important? Not necessarily that it has to go in the resolution. I'm just curious as to what you would focus on in that first 12 months.
Well, I feel what's realistic is contacting the state of Colorado, Boulder County, and the city of Boulder, and getting a report on what they're doing and getting their information and putting it in the report. To me, that's the primary goal. Now, what they have and what we'll get remains to be seen. Now, there may be other experts who can give us feedback. I know that, you know, there is some, like Dave Halleck and Eldora has been doing snapshots of the ecosystem over there for decades. You may want to contribute something in the way of information. And then there's the Watershed Alliance, other people like that, non-governmental entities, Save the Colorado, etc. So it's to me, the first year is going to be information gathering of what information is out there and compiling it from people who are already doing this work.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, so just at first glance, and I'll dig more into it and also read the original resolution to see if I can provide more feedback. But no, thank you, Larry, for asking.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Nicole. So I think, if something like PFAs comes up, and my first question would be, what is the city of Boulder and what are the city and the county doing about PFAS in the watershed? Are they monitoring them? If not, why not? And, who's responsible? And what do we know, if anything, about them? Because I think we've all been surprised at how prevalent they are in our environment. They're in everything from Gore-Tex to food to fire retardants and firefighting foam, and they're pervasive. So if there aren't any in the watershed, I would be really surprised. So I do think that's a really good question that we'll want to ask people who are monitoring water quality. And I think, that's part of this process. Tell us what you want to know. We'll see what we can find out.
I think that would
And if it's
I think that would be really great, actually, Alan, is we can link maybe some of the bigger things that are happening with BOT and the goals. And if we, water is a big deal right now. And if that were maybe somehow that we could kind of work together and focus, that maybe the first 12 months of inquiry, I think that would be interesting. The BOT would be very appreciative of that help.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to focus on.
Cool.
Is there a way? I love that. Thank you. The idea of focusing on water, even just water in general for Nederland. But is there a way to communicate that to BOT without outside of the resolution? I mean, is there some? I mean, I would like BOT to know that if we feel that way, that we would like water. What? I mean, could we? I mean, could we ask that you look at water issues, first? I mean,
We could put that in the aim, as Miranda suggested. Everything doesn't have to go in the resolution, but in the overall scope of goals of what we're trying to accomplish, that's a good fit for the aim, the overview, and one particular short-term goal.
Yeah, and I'll definitely defer to Miranda on this.
I do think you could put it in the aim. I think anything you put in the aim could, of course, then transition over to the resolution itself. But if it's a more for consideration, it could go into the aim.
Okay. That's where it'll be.
And
I wonder. Oh, you go, Nicole.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Miranda.
I was just going to say, I just wonder, Alan, if I could ask, would you be open to drafting, putting together a draft aim to go with the resolution when you bring it back to SAB so everyone can see both components?
Sure. Maybe, I'll get Larry's notes and Rich and I can look at it and co-author something with maybe Larry's input. But it'll definitely be Rich and I working on the next draft.
this is so exciting. I just want to thank you. Way to go.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for the really good questions and concerns. They're very legitimate and very useful.
Thank you for your work towards this.
It'll be my pleasure. I'm really glad Rich is working with me on it.
It's always good to have some help.
Absolutely.
All
And
right,
it's,
so we will bring this back in November and then take it to the BOT in December.
sounds good.
So with that said, we will move to the top of our agenda, which is actually a discussion item of the C&D recycling program.
And I'm going to bail out. You know, I got my flu vaccine today, but I get to negotiate with the virus so that I can get immunity. But thanks everybody for moving that up, and it's great to see everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Alan. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ellen.
Take care.
Thanks, Alan.
So, Melody, first before we start, I just want to introduce Brian Biggs to everyone. If you don't know him, Brian is one of our Parks team members. Brian, do you want to just introduce yourself and maybe share a little about yourself before we jump into this?
Wait a second. Who doesn't know Brian though?
I would think everyone knows Brian, but just in case, Brian, let's take it over.
Everyone, I'm Brian. And yeah, I work for the town for the Parks Department. I've got a little bit of a history in recycling from working for Boulder County with the Resource Conservation Division, and with that, we're kind of trying to devise a C&D plan also. It's an interesting thing. It seems like it has to be pretty alluring, or people are very willing to just pay money to bypass a C&D program.
Yeah, so I think the reason this is coming back, I'm gonna try to turn my camera on, but it doesn't. Well, we're gonna try. So I think the reason you wanted to talk about this is twofold, right? We have the construction and demolition program, and Nicole, I'll send you to you so you can see it. But just kind of a quick recap is when you pull a building permit, certain types, whether it's new building permit, demolition, major renovation, you're going to have to pay construction and demolition fees. Town is going to keep 30% to cover admin costs, but that does leave upwards of 70% that can be reimbursed to the payee, whether it's the contractor or the homeowner. What we're finding though is people are just willing to give up those funds, as Brian said. So while that's cool, because now there's a budget under C&D in which SAB could do things with, it's not the purpose of the program. So I think we're just hoping to talk through kind of two sets of that. First is there's about $19,000, and is there interest of SAB in how to use that money since it's not being returned, and it's probably about $15,000 we could free up to be used. And then the second part of that is, do you have any thoughts or recommendations on how we can strengthen this program so that it actually really does work, where we are refunding the money? As you'll note, if you all had a chance to look at it, and I can resend the documents, you know, it probably is a very paperwork heavy process. In order to get your money back, you have to fill out a really in-depth spreadsheet that we borrowed from Boulder County. I mean, you have to prove that you diverted your construction materials. And so while of course documentation is essential, maybe we're going a little heavy handed, but I think ultimately we just love feedback and to know what some of your financial priorities might be with this funding, because C&D funding is not funding that the Parks Department can just go out and spend. And so, Brian, I also open this up to you if there are financial priorities you see within parks that these funds could be used for. But they have to be earmarked towards zero waste, sustainability, those types of programs. It can't just go to anything. So it's kind of the brief intro. Yeah, Nicole.
Yeah, so a question, were any of these funds being used at the transfer station to house some of the materials that people may want to drop off? So none of this was being used for that?
No, just because that's Boulder County and they
It's
have
Boulder
plenty.
County.
Right. We try not to give it. No, so this funding is always sat. I mean, we're talking 15,000. That's since the program started. We're multiple years of people. In my time working with the planning and zoning department, I have never refunded the money once. Not even partial refunding of the money. I mean, people just, to them, it's a drop in the bucket when your building permit costs $50,000.
Right.
What's a couple thousand? And I don't want to deal with your paperwork. And so sure, it's a funding stream, but that's not the purpose of this program.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, I know we did want to set aside, or ask for, I should say, 5,000, is that right? For, paying a capstone group if we get one. Of course, we don't know yet, whether or not we'll have that expenditure. We'll need to hopefully encourage some students to come join us. But other than that, I like the idea of supplementing Parks budget if they need or have a specific project that they think needs to be done, because I think part of why we want to encourage recycling this construction is so that we can continue to enjoy our great outdoors that we have here. And I will say, from watching Steve build his building during that whole process, I think that was when you guys first launched it, or maybe it hadn't quite been launched yet, that he really wanted to participate in it. And finding the contractors or the people that would actually guarantee to recycle his materials and or haul it away was tough, particularly because his building was large, and so those pieces of steel were large, and you needed somebody who wanted it or somebody with a really big truck to haul it away, and that was going to end up costing more than just paying the fee to town. So I think that logistics might be a large part for that.
I had a comment on that too. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I read this, somebody who's building a house doesn't have the ability to take their own material down and recycle it. Is that correct? You have to hire an outside firm to do it? I think that's a barrier.
I don't recall. You said, Laura, is that in the program details
Um,
that you were talking
you know,
about?
that's vaguely, I'm remembering that
Okay.
you can't take your own, and to me, that's probably a deal breaker for most people, just because it's really hard to find someone and hire them to move your materials and go recycle them. You might be recycling them yourself, or taking them the resource, or taking them, to wherever they need to go. But to have to hire some third party is expensive and also logistically really difficult.
So it looks like when I pull up the program details, I think we listed it as a third bullet point, but I believe you can bring all the materials yourself. It says acceptable materials can be brought to Boulder County Transfer or hauled to Boulder Resource Central, and Boulder can assist with recycling information site assessments, or you can hire an independent hauler for recycling materials.
Okay. When I read it initially, I thought it said that you couldn't do it yourself. But my general
Okay.
point would be that if you want people to do it, you want to streamline it so that it's easier to do. If no one's doing it, it's not working. It needs to be easier to do, probably.
I
I
definitely see how
think.
you could get this, because there is one then section that says which haulers recyclers can I use, and it says contractors and property owners may use any haulers they choose. And I guess I'm not familiar enough. I can't say. And this is, I think, is something, Brian, too, that we'll have to really look into once you're fully staffed. Is this program has always struggled with a champion. We had a staff member who was kind of working it and doing site assessments, but it's always like even struggle with like whose department does it fall into? Is it planning and zoning, and should it always stay with planning and zoning, or is it a parks department because they have some of that recycling sustainability? But this is always kind of floated, I think, because it doesn't have a champion.
I don't really see why this would be part of parks. I mean, I don't get the connection. Whereas I could see some other board, zoning or somebody. I mean, why
Yeah, and it could go under zoning. It went under, I think, parks, because Chris Pelletier created it, right? So it's a public works thing. So it kind of fell under public works, but then it was being charged under planning and zoning. And then there's like a disconnect between planning and zoning, telling parks. And I actually was just talking to Erica about this. I would tend to agree, Larry, that I think it belongs back under planning and zoning. You know, and maybe that's what we do, and we work it under that angle. Because I think a lot of why it also hasn't been successful is like we charge you, but then no one's checking in to be like, how's it going? You know, how's the diversion going? And if no one's asking and no one's checking, well, then of course they're going to forget about the money. You know, very few people are like, I could get back that $700. I should check. But if there was that consistent touch base, you know, so I do agree we need to internally revisit maybe where this program falls under what department.
So based off your description right there, so we don't really know how much
Yeah.
is being recycled or diverted.
Right, right. You know, and my hope is that, you know, people still are, but maybe they just don't want to go through the hassle or they forgot about
Sure.
C&D. You know, we send them a bunch of paperwork when they first get their permit, but often, you know, they're not even at that phase for months or a year, and you may have forgotten what that line was on your invoice. And so there is I think, a capacity where we have to do a better job of touching base and reminding people of the value of this program.
I think Laura's comment makes that really clear, that
Mhm.
we need better communication to the builder, that there are different venues for recycling, and that the town is actually there to help them. We shouldn't have any money in the C&D. We really shouldn't. There should be no money there.
Right. I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah, the 30% it goes kind of into revenue, and then the 70% sits in what we call like an escrow fund. And that is the goal. The goal is always to return that back. Um, yeah, I agree, Larry. It should be zeroed out. It should not be viewed as a resource or a revenue stream. And it is, of course, there are these funds, but I'd like to see those funds be relatively stale in that sense of, you know, it's $15,000 now. It shouldn't be 30 next year.
I think the spreadsheet sounds onerous.
Yeah.
You know, if I take stuff down to resource, I can get just write out a receipt of what I'm bringing or whatever, and just have them give that to me that this is what we received from you, and go from there. I think sitting down with a spreadsheet, it's just you're trying to build a house. It just is something apparently people are not willing to do. That's what it
Mhm.
sounds like to me. So, making it simpler, where it's clear in the directions that people can take their own materials, where they can take them, and then just their proof of it just needs to be less onerous, I think, or less. I don't know. I don't know what the spreadsheet involves, but based on what you said, it sounds like it was a bit maybe
It,
too much for
it
people.
it is. We borrowed it from Boulder County, and I remember I was like, "Well, this is a lot." But I think we just didn't really know like what's the best way. And Brian, maybe you can educate us. You know, a receipt. Would a receipt show how much was diverted? That's going to be one of the problems. If you just bring us a receipt that says I diverted stuff, well, then we still don't know what you diverted, and I don't know, Brian, if transfer station does that, or it's just like you
At the
can't.
transfer station, oftentimes these materials would be coming in for free, and we would take in like a large amount of metal or something like this and estimate how much it was and write a receipt, but with $0 on it because it wouldn't cost anything. But that receipt then I believe would be used. I don't know the final ending point of that receipt, but I believe it was turned in at some point, maybe entered into a spreadsheet or maybe at least turned in to recoup some money at the end. But oftentimes there would be a lot of cardboard from water heaters and appliances going into a new build, and it would be a truck full, and I would estimate a quantity and write a receipt even though cardboard is coming into the transfer station for free. And they would use that to show that they were indeed not just throwing all of these things away into one roll-off dumpster at the job site, where really economically there's not much of a incentive there. It didn't seem like, because they had the dumpster there already. So it really did have to be promoted. I believe, like you said, we had someone who just left who was doing the C&D, but I think he would go at the beginning of a build and drop off some paperwork that showed different facilities that would take different items for recycling, and how you could get rid of the recycling. And then I don't know how much checking back in there was. And at the end of the day, if you haven't seen anyone come back for the money, it doesn't sound really like right now people are really enticed by the price tag, the financial benefit of it.
I would agree.
For that reason, have we thought about increasing the price?
We could. Yeah, so the way we calculate your deposit is 25 cents per square footage of the project. It could be increased.
I mean, on both ends, so not just the deposit that's taken, but then
Oh.
the reimbursement, because if you're going to make it financially painful, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, I want that money back, right?
Mhm,
That
mhm.
may behoove folks to want to go, and agreed, you know, with some of the things that's been said, maybe simplifying the process as well. But the fact is that we want to encourage the behavior, and so sometimes to encourage it, you got to make it painful. It's just a
Mhm.
thought.
Right. And sometimes there are people who are like, what is this C&D? And but usually, to your point, it's just a drop in the bucket. I mean, we don't do it for every permit, right? We're only doing it for your permits that are going to cost probably tens of thousands of dollars. And this is a couple thousand.
Well, I love the way this is going because I totally am aware of how financial incentives can change behaviors. If
Mm-hmm.
we create more of a financial incentive for the builder by increasing, I'm thinking dramatically increase the price at the front end. But we have to make it easier for them to get that money back. And then I'm thinking about budget and staff time. I mean, that somebody would need to be, there'd have to be a dedicated person, it seems to me, or somebody that would be the go-to person for the builder who's totally busy when they're building. I mean, they have 100 things to think about. This is
Mm-hmm.
one. So how great if they could make one communication, phone call or whatever, to somebody there whose staff who actually is going to answer their question and help them. And that would be what the money would be for. To pay for that staff time, which is going to be necessary. These people are busy. I mean, we have to think like they do. They don't care about this. So if we charge them a bunch of money up front, they'll care more, but then they still need that contact. And they need it right kind of when they need it. You know, they're busy. But I love the way this is going. I mean, honestly.
Well, so I guess I wonder if there were, two members of SAB who would be open to working with me. I don't know, Brian, if you've been selected as the champion of this, or someone from the parks team to evaluate this a little bit more and see where we can improve and streamline things. And we would love to have a SAB member a part of those conversations.
Well, I was already going to volunteer zero waste aspects. So I was already volunteering going to plug in on this from the viewpoint of zero waste, just informationally. So I'm happy to also take on those other roles, but I would love it if anybody else wants to get involved.
Yeah, I'm very happy to help as well. I wouldn't be able to devote, like a full-time position towards it, but I could definitely be available to help.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I think, Brian, if you have the capacity to just sit in on meetings, it would be nice to maybe get this set up in a new way before the end of the year. So the new, permits, the 2023 permits, had a better C&D structure behind them. So my thought is maybe every other week for the rest of the month, like 4 meetings, and we could just kind of nail this down.
Mm-hmm.
And it would come back to SAB.
Yep, we bring it back to SAB.
Okay. My comment is I think it makes sense to really try to streamline it before increasing the fees. I think that there's unintended consequences with really high fees. We want more affordable housing. The more expensive it is to build, the less affordable housing can be. And so as if we're talking about dramatically increasing this, and it's not super doable, you know, if you've got to go to 50 different places to recycle things and you got to hire people and it's just not something you can do, it just creates, I think, a step backwards. So that's my comment.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, no, I agree. All right, well, Larry, it sounds like you're on the hook.
Can I just make a quick comment about the C&D program? So this was Chris Pelletier's baby. He was really excited about developing this program. And just in the last few months, I've had quite a few folks reach out and say, can you tell us more about your program? How did you all get it started? It is not a common thing for small municipalities to have a C&D program. It is really special. Lions has reached out and said, you know, what are the details? We'd really like to get something started. How did you all do it? Of course, it was Chris's project. So just wanted to throw that out to you all. Like, this is really a cool asset that Nederland has, and other communities look up to us for lots of reasons, but this is one of them.
Cool. Well, I will reach out, Brian and Larry, and we'll try to get something set up for us to sit down and talk through this. But I appreciate the initial feedback. And since I resent all the documents, if there are other things that come up, please let me know.
Thank you.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank-
Brian, I'm assuming you're going to jump off. I think you did. Bye. Yes? Are you
No.
hanging?
Yeah.
All right. Good. Cool.
I just want to thank you, Brian, for joining us. This has been very helpful.
Larry, you're welcome.
All right. So moving on our agenda, we have just general board member updates. So I'll give an update, I guess, for the energy subcommittee since Chris is not here. As we've mentioned in the last couple meetings, we're really moving forward on the U.S. solar campaign, trying to get people signed up for that. We had the event that a lot of you were at the community center last week on the 20th. And that was a really great film. If any of you have the chance to go back and watch that, The Scale of Hope, it was really moving and fantastic. So we also gave away some light bulbs, tried to get rid of as many as we could. Gave out some smart energy strips to folks and some battery power banks. And we had the panel discussion, which was really nice, talking to just a few community members that were there about, you know, what are our barriers to getting to 100% renewable? What does that look like? And I think one thing that came up, especially in the midst of us doing this U.S. solar campaign, is just how do we make sure that we're actually reaching people? I know that at the last kind of round of something like this, when we did Renewable Connect and that campaign, what made it really successful was that Alan and Lester went door to door and just talked to people about it. And so I think that as we move forward with this, we should consider getting together in groups of 2 and just trying to go around and canvass Nederland and the communities close to us, like Caribou Road, and just letting people know about this opportunity where they can both participate in solar energy, but also save a little bit of money. So that's all I got for that. I don't know if you have any updates, Larry, for the Zero Waste Subcommittee.
You know, Erica would be actually the better one to speak. She knows more about the grant we just did, so I wonder if she could speak.
Sure, happy to. So we just submitted the Zero Waste Boulder County grant on Monday for an LED sign at the transfer station. We did get a letter of support from Cody Lilstrom on behalf of the Resource Conservation Division at Boulder County, as well as the transfer station, which was fantastic. I just had a meeting last night with RCAB, the Resource Conservation Advisory Board for the county, and it sounds like there was only 8 applications. So that means we're looking pretty good as far as our application on Monday. So stay tuned for that. We'll hear more officially in December. It does need to be approved by the county commissioners for the individual projects. Other things with zero waste, we just started meeting in person again, which is really fun. We're meeting at the library, and we were lucky enough to have Nikki with us at our last meeting, which was fantastic. Brian, you are always welcome. If we can entice you with cookies, we'll bring cookies. I'm also really interested in the RREO grant, which is due in early January, for another focus that the Zero Waste Subcommittee has on zero waste infrastructure to support events in Nederland. So Zero Waste Group really just, Larry in particular, busted his butt at the farmers market most all season, and trying to use some glass boxes or plastic boxes that Eldora had loaned us. And so really just trying to get some infrastructure like that we have from the town, where we'll be able to use that for our events and perhaps loan out to other events as requested. I just had a request from the holiday market, which is being run by the Nederland area seniors this year, or maybe every year, but they are asking about compost resources and if we have big compost bins available. And that's a tricky question. We don't really have that infrastructure right now, and I think the group itself is really excited to see what we could acquire as a subcommittee and then help support some of the events like this holiday market in December. Larry, what else should we add?
Well, yeah, can I just latch on to what you just said with a concern of mine, which is tricky. And that is, we can buy equipment. We absolutely need it. We do. And some of it would be event oriented as I'm seeing it. So like for the farmers market events or other things, I think it's very important to have some equipment, and maybe we'll require others to provide their own. But in my experience, we need to have some of our own. It's not that much, but it's crucial to have it. And Eldora saved us this summer at farmers market with those lucite bins. I mean, Erica was the one who, it was Erica and Hunter up at Eldora. It was between them. They were kind of like, hey, there were these lucite display bins, and maybe those could fit on, you know, the bins at the farmer's market. Maybe we could just figure out something that works and that isn't huge. Like, you know, like, so it all happened. It was just so beautiful, the creativity. And so we have Hunter and Erica to really thank for that. I stepped in, I was like, great. And I went and got those bins and put it together. Okay. So I'm saying all this because we had returned the bins to Eldora. There were, you know, they're going to use them this winter. So we no longer have anything. But suppose we got some stuff that, like I'm talking about, maybe even composting stuff. There's going to need to be some storage, and it's got to be town storage. I mean, this summer I was storing extra lucite boxes from Eldora here at my home in my own storage shed, because there really wasn't. We didn't know. You know, it was like so any, you know, we didn't know where to put them, and so I was like, fine, I'll just store them. But this can't go on this way. So what I'm wanting to get at, and this is not the time to delve into this. We have so much more to deal with, but this is kind of important if you're thinking about it from a zero waste perspective, what we're coming up with. And so maybe this is a question for Miranda on the side. It's like, how can we secure or can we secure some town storage, which is actually safe and approved to use? I mean, we're already using something, but there's questions about whether it's actually safe. And, you know, it's like, oh, and I'm like, you know, we need storage. So I'll stop right there. But I don't want us to actually buy anything infrastructure wise until we have a place to put it. I guess that's really what I'm getting at.
Yeah, definitely, Larry. We'd need a place to store it as well as a staff member that could check it in and out to these different events that are going to be using it.
So then, can I just ask a further question? How would that happen if it's going to happen? And I know the town is totally busy, so it's like I don't want to bring up something new, but how would this happen?
I think one of the challenges is going to be anything that requires personnel capacity is that's the biggest challenge, right? Is like we just don't have the personnel for enough the current tasks. So adding that on, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I guess I think that you have to look at this as a longer term goal because it's not something that's a 2023 capacity. And I don't know how that feels for everyone. Is like, do we just approach this as a, and what happened at the Tuesday night meeting, if anyone was present for the Board of Trustees work session on the budget, I think one of the big takeaways is this short and long-term planning. Like everything is coming forward as a like right here, right now, let's get it done. It must happen. And we just really need to be thinking at like, what really is the 2023 priority? Could this be a 2024? But map it out now so that the board knows when this year ends. Don't be surprised in 2024 when we're coming forward seeking that financial support for a staff member and the infrastructure. But plan it now. And I think that's one thing that Nederland has always struggled with is that long-term planning and recognizing that if it can't happen now, it doesn't mean that the effort shouldn't be put into figuring out how to make it happen in year 2 or year 3.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question, Miranda, as far as events borrowing and or renting things from town. I believe things like barricades and cones maybe is something that events currently rents out. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's on our fee schedule. We can rent barricades. I don't believe we have cones. We don't have that many cones, but we can rent barricades.
Yeah, and so I would imagine that it would be something similar to that, especially for some of the larger events, like say, Frozen Dead Guy Days or a similar type of event. Or like the farmers market has cans for our regular events, but for the harvest market where it's bigger, we would definitely look at renting more from town. And so in the process of going through that special event application and that zero waste checklist, I suppose that's where we could add in, do you also want to rent these cans from town? And then those would be delivered at whatever time Public Works would deliver the barricades as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And what I'll tell you is the Public Works hates renting the barricades. And why I say that is
I
A,
know.
we don't have that many, and B, it's staff, right? It's staff
Yeah.
time to take it down. And so I would definitely say we need to get Emmett and Nikki involved in that conversation because, they are, it's tough. Their fee schedule is tough. And when someone wants to rent a barricade, oftentimes we're like, can you go somewhere else? Because getting staff kind of involved, it's taxing. And that's always been the feedback is if we had larger teams, sure. But, to move the barricade down takes a whole crew to move a barricade down to where it's being rented.
For big events,
Unless it's like those quick little the ones you take down. Sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
no, it's okay. Just a quick question. When some of these big events do come through town, it's usually a third party that's supplying like the trash disposal and refuse, or is it the town that's actually supplying that?
It's required to be a third party unless the event itself has the capacity to do it themselves.
So could there be something around making sure that third parties are composting and supplying that infrastructure if we can't do it today?
So we do, under the zero waste ordinance, require zero waste plans that would have compost, recycling, trash. I'd look to Erica. Erica's really taken on that zero waste, like the vendor agreements and the setups. I would say the oversight after we get your map and you say we're doing X, Y, and Z. Again, that kind of check-in piece I think is often missing, but Erica's really filled in that gap.
Yeah, so right now, it depends on the size of the event, what they have the capacity to do as far as our zero waste requirements for events in town. But like Miranda's saying, like all vendors have to sign a zero waste agreement. Now we do have the capacity to go back through and make sure we have all those agreements. And if it isn't followed through on, we could come back to that agreement and say, what happened? Why do we have plastic bags at this event when they're supposed to be compostable products and recyclable products? So the concern though is that we're sending these folks to like EcoCycle for their X-frames. And so the farmers market didn't have the capacity for X-frames necessarily for the whole market. And this is a much larger conversation. Melody has much more experience and background with this than I do. But basically, there was some issues with trash at the farmers market this year. And this is kind of how the conversation really got started, as Larry was alluding to. And it would be really a whole nother layer of this too, Nicole, is like the community center runs its own events, and businesses are not allowed to compost officially at the transfer station right now. So that's another piece. You know, the compost was initially being done at the community center. Again, Melody can speak to this better. Right now, the Nederland area seniors is holding the holiday market, and they're in a facility that can't compost at the transfer station. And yeah, there are vendors that pick up compost, but they don't pick up large amounts of compost. Western doesn't pick up compost in Nederland currently. So it's going to be some of these smaller groups like Green Girl, and they are not going to do large scale compost pickups at this time. At least last time I talked to Bridget, who runs their program. So there's many pieces to it, and so I think the conversation is just how do we help support these gaps, and I don't know if we have a great solution at this point, but there are grants available. There's next cycle, which is another aspect of this recycling grant, that, sorry, I can't have to laugh, Brian. Brian's doing an art tour tonight.
I know the picture. I just realized that the picture is changing, huh? In the background.
I think, is that Ham?
That's a ham.
That's Ham.
Ham. Oh, Ham. Love you, Ham.
The beach. I love it. You're very talented. But so there are grants available to support developing these recycling and composting infrastructures for communities, and that's a conversation the Zero Waste Group is having right now, and I think it's important. Let's get Public Works and Streets involved and see what's realistic and what are we missing, and how can we take advantage of these opportunities that are available right now for grants for communities along the Front Range. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That helps. I guess I would, yeah, sort of echo, and I haven't dug very deeply into parks or streets and some of their things that they got for 2023. I guess I would have the same question for Miranda as Miranda did. Is this a 2023 objective or is it a 2024 objective? I think that's a valid question that she asked.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so there's a couple other pieces of this. You know, Erica mentioned really our capacity to be able to compost things. Businesses not being able to compost is one of these big barriers. So my first question is, where is the county at with their grant of an in-vessel composter? Do we have any updates on that yet?
Great question.
Yes, spring of 2023. It's still limited by space. It is limited by the in-vessel that they choose as well. And how long does the compost need to sit to cure? And where would we be able to do that? So there's a couple pieces up in the air. Todd, our main contact at the county that was working on this, has left. So Cody and Taylor have stepped in, and they are at all of our zero waste meetings, which is fantastic. So it's been really good to connect with them at least monthly and get an update from them. But the last that I've heard is really like spring 2023, and there are some big challenges right now.
Okay. And so I would imagine that they still wouldn't be able to accept commercial compost at that point then, especially when they're trying to talk with the schools and get the schools composting. I would think that even with that in-vessel composter, they probably wouldn't have the capacity to just open it up.
No, actually, they are thinking they will be able to open it up
Okay.
if they get an vessel. Yep, like what they're looking
Okay.
at.
That's
And
good.
there's some really interesting conversations about, could they even pick up business compost from businesses in town? Because
Uh-huh.
Cody, Matt Hannon, and myself did some just kind of preliminary interviews with some businesses on First Street, and what are their hurdles to composting? And it really was being able to take it to the transfer station. So even
Yep.
if they're allowed, it would have to
Yep.
be cost. It would have to make sense financially, and then it would also have to make sense staff time and having that person haul that material up to the compost or to the transfer station. So there's some interesting conversations happening about how the county can support that. And so and we have been told, and Larry, please confirm this, that if they have an in vessel, they are hoping to open it up to everyone in Nederland, businesses and residents alike. And right now, Laura and I talked yesterday, BVSD should be composting at this point. The last we heard was that they were able to compost as of the beginning of this school year. Laura sent an email to Geeta, who's in charge of their sustainability program, to see exactly what's happening. The elementary school had a really good program going for a while, and I'm just not sure myself about what's happening at the middle high school. So hopefully we'll learn more about that.
Just want to chime in that it really was based on volunteers, and the effort that what we were trying to accomplish is to make it a job, part of a job description for someone to do the composting so that it's more stable and not just totally dependent on volunteers. It also needs to be a person that has a CDL driver's license, which I know the district is very short on bus drivers and the CDL drivers. And then our third hurdle was the capacity for the transfer station. But what we heard was that the transfer station can now take the compost from the schools. Brian, do you know if they're coming in with compost now?
I don't work at the transfer station any longer, but when I was there, the elementary school absolutely was bringing in their compost in 5-gallon buckets. And that would be every week, that would be a chore for somebody, and they would come in and dump that off. And I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head with the actual capacity and volume for the transfer station. Right now, that trailer, that green composting trailer, goes down to Boulder once a week. And I believe Boulder County could probably, if they could figure out a way to increase that to 2 times a week, you would have the issues of fuel consumption and that side of things, but that would open up the volume a little bit more. And the way I understood it, that in-vessel composting system that is being talked about will be able to handle more volume than the compost trailer and have it out the other end, and be able to keep it in almost more of a closed loop system where we can go in as a community and use our own compost that we're generating to grow our plants, to eat, to make more compost and keep the whole thing going right around.
Yeah.
So Erica, when you said the spring of 2023, does that mean that in vessel gets planted at the transfer station, or is there still a lot of things that need to happen before it actually gets there?
There are some things that need to happen, but just so we're all on the same page, my understanding from Cody is that he wrote a grant, a forward grant, Front Range Waste Diversion Grant, for a reuse barn at the transfer station. the county's match for that grant was the in-vessel composting facility. So both those projects are really spearheaded by Cody and the county at this point. So the reuse barn is planned to be in like the front right corner when you come into the transfer station, and it's going to be a 20 by 30 foot barn, is what I've seen. The hope was that the compost facility would kind of go where the metal recycling is or where the refrigerators are. So it's limited in space, but they are looking at both of these projects as part of this forward grant. So there are challenges. Obviously, weather is what's slowing us down now. We're getting into our windy cold season, but also that size and then that curing. Where do they cure the compost, depending on the facility that they go with? There's also been concerns about the end product, just like A1 Organics has. And what is the quality of that compost at the end? Will we really be able to put it on our gardens, or is it going to be something that's more of a low grade compost? So that's been a big part of the conversation of what type of in-vessel do we go with and what would help us get better products at the end. And then obviously staff capabilities. These in-vessels don't take a lot of staff hours. Many of them have electrical augers that'll rotate, and then you just you're moving compost, once a week or whatever that schedule looks like. But there is going to be, more required of those staff at the transfer station, which they're already working so hard.
Yeah. And so then my second question is, realistically, when we look at the wastewater treatment facility and this future goal of it being able to compost things, I mean, what is the timeline there? Like 5 to 10 years or longer? Do we
Miranda and
have an
Nicole.
idea?
So Miranda and Nicole could speak to this probably really well. I'll just get it started. So we did a tour of the wastewater treatment plant on Tuesday, which was fantastic. I didn't realize, my battery's gonna die too. I didn't realize that we could put in a forward grant for compost at the wastewater treatment plant that is not food compost. It would be biosolids and then slash from the slash yard. And we could make a really high quality product with much more control over that product, because it wouldn't be relying on human behavior. It would be relying on human waste, right? So that's something to think about, Melody. I hadn't thought about, and that is still being championed by Jesse Sievers and Billy Giblin on the BOT currently. They're looking at, again, putting in a forward grant for something that's capable of doing that at the wastewater treatment plant, which is fantastic. My suggestion on Tuesday was, let's see if we can at least be prepared to increase to food compost. And Nicole actually mentioned, like, well, could we compost Christmas trees? And I'm thinking like pumpkins at Halloween, and like, how can we slowly get ourselves started? But I don't think that project is off the table. I think it's very much still in discussion and in the works and getting planned right now. But it may not be a food piece. It may just be this like biosolids and slash, at least to start off with. We see how it goes. The A1 Organics is just struggling right now with this quality at the end product. And, we really want to make sure that we have that as well. So we can really say, yeah, we have Class A compost, and you can put this on food and grow food with it safely. Nicole, Miranda, I'm sure you have more to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Melody, for asking that, because that was going to be one of the things that I was going to bring up as well, is it's almost a guaranteed Class A product that we would get from the biosolids project. And it's, it's very exciting, and we're sort of halfway there. What we create today is a Class B product. So where you could put that on like maybe trees or things that aren't food production, there's just another piece that needs to be created at the wastewater treatment facility in order to make it the grade A. And so I think this is just a fabulous way for us to kind of be, again, like Brian had mentioned, closed loop, right? But you know, part of that would be a very much a PR campaign on removing the stigma of human waste becoming compost. And I mean, I held it. There is a picture of me on Facebook. I'm smelling it. It smells earthy. It's fantastic. I'll be the showgirl for this, no problem. But there will need to be a little bit of a hump that we have to get over in terms of the stigma with that. But in terms of the grants and whatnot, Miranda, you could probably speak more to that.
Yeah, so the Forward grant is actually, I'm relieved because I thought it was supposed to end this year. It is rolling year to year. And so there is a whole section of the grant that is specific to the extension of your wastewater treatment facilities. And if you fall within that kind of that designation of a wastewater facility applying, it's a zero match grant. And so, you know, obviously a ton of work to prepare an application. JVA is going to submit a project scope and they would help us write this. But if anyone's familiar with our biosolid study that we did 2015, there's a whole chapter dedicated to this composting idea, these Class A facilities, and outlines through 4 different strategies for how we could go about this. And so our goal is to work with JVA to just update that since it's probably pretty outdated, and then to submit an application.
That was also very exciting, is when we think about the transition that we go from Class B compost quality to a Class A. It was also being able to introduce kind of some renewable energy. So in order to do that, you have to heat up, like you have to heat it up very much, the Class B compost, to make it Class A. And the way, one of the proposals was to do it through solar energy. And so again, it's sort of just this really cool, you know, renewable energy ecosystem, everything kind of coming back to us, and the compost going back to our vegetables and everything. That was just really cool. But like Miranda said, that does need to be updated. So I hope that answers your question, Melody.
Yeah, I think so. And so I feel like as we plan for how are we going to compost for the next 5 years, you know, we should really think more in that kind of short term, because we don't know what we're going to be able to do with our waste really after that. So I'm excited to hear that we will have an in-vessel, we hope, of some kind by March. And I think that will drastically help all of our efforts. So yeah, I don't have any other thoughts, but that's great to hear. I remember touring the biosolids facility when it first opened and smelling that crap, and it was great. You know, it's a really cool thing that we got here, and definitely, I know he's not here, but thanks to Chris for what he did to pull that off. All right. Any other zero waste things to talk about?
Well, first
Yeah.
of all, I'm totally excited by the biosolids initiative. That's just fabulous. Going back to the composter at the transfer station, my thinking is that I would really like to wait and see it there and operating on the ground and performing. And to me, at that, I mean, we could do some pre-planning around it, but it's really hard for me to sort of understand the larger picture until we have something we can really actually talk about. That's not just still up in the air as a grant or as a grant in process. When we have the facility there, it's going to be a big capacity item. I mean, Cody gave us the numbers. I don't have them in front of me. They were big numbers. I mean, it was so exciting. We'll be able to compost all of Nederland there. I mean, everybody and everything. we can do it. So it would go back to the issues around how do we get from wherever it is in Nederland to the transfer station, and that's the next hard part. What I would like to suggest is that we bump this to 2024, though. I just don't see, unless Erica has some thoughts. I mean, it's just hard for me to see what kind of grants we could write based on something that doesn't even exist yet. And then it just seems like too much to me, but I'm willing to backtrack on that. It's just that, I don't know. And then the town, and just everything going on with the town's budget. It's like maybe 2024 is better. Erica, if you have a thought on that, I'd love to know.
Yeah, I appreciate your ideas, Larry. Just who I am, I'm like, no, let's not wait. Let's go for it now, and we can defer to 2024. But I think it's really about having a conversation with other critical stakeholders like Nikki and Emmett, and making sure that we have everybody's buy-in. I think that's the most important piece before we move forward, whether it's 2023 or 2024. But I'd be curious to hear what others think. These grants are available, Forward Grant and others, our REO and Next Cycle, for at least the next few years. So I don't know if there is an immediate rush. Thoughts from others?
Yeah, I mean, if there's the ability to apply for some of these grants, even mid 2023, but to be able to be used for 2024, or to kind of do some of that long-term planning, like Miranda was talking about, I think, and also like putting it, as she was referencing, is like making the BOT aware, like, hey, like, after you get through 2023 and you figured out water rights and affordable housing and these things, like, let's really hit hard the composting. And it may just be that the biosolids project and this sort of coincides an early 2024 kind of a deal or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know the requirements of the grant, but I'm wondering how much staff time we could write into a grant to, help administer this program and deliver the cans and bring them back. And so that would be a question for, the grant administrators is, can we put staff time on there as part of this?
Critical question. Yes, because if we can offer that support to the city, it just makes it that much easier. So, yeah. And maybe write in, the salary for a full-time sustainability coordinator while you're at it, Erica. Right?
All right. Are there any other board member updates, Laura or Rich?
Nothing from me.
I've got the BVSD sustainability meeting next week. I have asked Gita to update our sustainability dashboard, which was something that the district put together for both of our schools, just to kind of see where improvements can be made. So hopefully she'll be able to get that to us. BVSD, Gita at BVSD, she's the sustainability person. She won a big award called the Green Print Trailblazer Award from the Green Schools National Network. And they had a big event around that. And so I just thought I'd mention that BVSD is a leader in this area. And so we're trying to find ways to coordinate and connect with them. Beyond that, Erica and I have talked about trying to connect with the Youth Advisory Board. to see if they can help us. And I think she already mentioned this with the U.S. solar push, just to see if that's another channel to reach people, and just see how it dovetails with what their goals are. So we're trying to get that on the books too. So that's all I have.
For the community solar garden thing, and I'd be happy to help somebody on this. Has there been any conversations of like having a night at, partnering with like a very nice brewery or something and saying, a very nice brewery is going to offer, like a discount on drinks or whatever, and we're sort of set up there to sign people up, kind of a thing. I don't know if like the kind of the partnerships with businesses has been discussed or whatnot.
That's a
And
good
Brian's got
idea.
another picture. Well done, Brian. But yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to sort of think through some of those ideas, or even social media. I know we've been kind of posting it on social media, but we all know we've got to see it like 7 times. And so I'd be happy to be an advocate for that. I think I was one of the first of the 25 to sign up. I was super excited to see it as a thing. And so I can also be a fangirl. But, if we're needing more ideas or whatnot, be happy to think through that with everyone.
Yeah, Nicole, that's a great suggestion. We have not done that yet. So let's chat and let's get a date and get a sponsor, and maybe we can even have multiple sponsors and multiple evenings.
Yeah.
It'd be great to also coincide with like a bingo night. I think there are Thursdays, or other events that are happening.
Or trivia, yeah, something like that. Yeah, they typically have trivia too. It's even better. It's even better.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like fun. So the next thing on the agenda would be sustainability coordinator updates. If there's anything else you have to update us on, Erica.
Yeah, so I shared this staff report with you all. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. I do have a couple updates. So Matt Hinn and I had to reschedule our PACE assessments to December 1st. So if you know any businesses in town that would like to have an assessment done and just start that relationship with PACE and with Matt, who's fantastic, please send me an email. We will both be walking around Nederland December 1st for the bulk of that day, usually like 10 to 3 if we have interested businesses. Other things, so I am going to submit the electrification project proposal tomorrow to the capstone group. I just got some feedback from Miles tonight on that, so I'll update it and then send it out to them. I've gotten some good feedback from them initially. I think they're really excited. And if you all haven't seen it, I'll put in the chat shortly here, but we're still listed as one of their highlighted projects from 2018. So it's a list right to Netherlands 100% roadmap from their program, which is great. So I think they're excited to have a second project with us and to be able to build off of that initial one for sure. With studying this electrification roadmap for our project proposal, I've also gotten excited about 2 campaign initiatives, and I just want to couch this on, I know signing petitions and submitting resolutions and proclamations isn't what we all love to do. But I do want to put out there that when I'm writing a project proposal, it's really helpful to say that we've made these commitments. And so that's where these resolutions are really helpful. Yeah, we committed to 100% in 2017 by 2025. Yeah, we have an energy efficiency day proclamation we just put in and a climate emergency resolution. It really means that we've prioritized these initiatives for our town, and it's gone all the way through that process. And so with that in mind, we had a meeting today, Rich, Miranda, and myself, with the Partners in Energy team for our Nederland electric vehicle action plan. Do you know what it's called, Miranda? The exact title is. But one of the pieces in that is this Go EV Cities pledge. and I'd like to send it all to you and just get your feedback if you're interested in having something like this move forward. But it really commits Nederland to a prioritization of electric vehicles. And there's some details in there, like electrifying their fleet, supporting residential EV adoption, supporting infrastructure, supporting codes, very specific things. But I would be very excited to see Nederland sign on to that. And it also is something to fall back on and say, okay, we're looking at buying new vehicles. Well, we just committed to this EV plan, this Go EV Cities pledge. We need to keep this in mind when we make decisions about future vehicles. And maybe there's no EV vehicles available to purchase. Like, that's its own conversation. But I'd like to see us really take that initiative. Other communities around us have taken it, obviously Boulder, and others. I'm also excited about the Cities Race to Zero pledge. I don't know if that's the exact one that we want to sign on to, but if any of you know of electrification campaigns for communities, let me know. And if you're interested in signing on to something like that, it's the future. We know that we need to electrify our grid, and the faster we do it, the better off we will all be. And so I think it would be very appropriate for Nederland to make a commitment like that. The city of Eagle signed on to a commitment to net zero for their community by 2028 and net zero for their larger community by 2030. And you guys know me, I'm seeing that commitment and saying, why can't we do something like that? And I also think it would help with a project proposal like what I'm working on right now for this CU Capstone project on how do we actually electrify our grid. Does anybody have any comments or questions, initial thoughts about that and these pledges?
No, but if there's any extra information than other what's in your report, then please send along. Love to dig further.
Yeah, absolutely, Nicole. This is not in my report, so I'll send this out separate. This is additional stuff that just kind of come across my plate. Questions, comments, Larry? I saw you unmute.
I love electrification. It's absolutely the future, and we need to embrace it. And if the town could pass a resolution along the lines that you're describing, that would be great. But this is, I've been actually studying this for years. And because the problem has to do with converting natural gas and propane, which has a fantastic BTU output compared to electricity. And that's where it's a physics problem, and it's a big one, and it's very serious. And I'm not aware of a really intelligent, forward-looking conversation going on about this. It's almost like it's too big and too difficult. And so I hear nothing from the feds on this. And maybe I'm missing something, but it's like, no. So to me, then, this is where the town of Nederland and all these little towns, bigger towns too, are going to have to be having municipal intelligence of their own and energy to make this happen. Oh dear. So then it's one thing to talk about like beefing up the grid to bring in the new capacity of energy that we would need to replace the propane and nat gas BTUs. That's kind of the easy part almost. That's not easy, but it's relatively easy compared to actually getting buildings ready to be converted to electrical heat only. And the complications, I won't go into them now because I don't want to bore people, but I can't work on this. I'm working on zero waste. And so there's a part of me that's like, Larry, stay away from this massively interesting subject that you know a lot about. But this is where Capstone could come in if they want to. Wow, they could do some heavy lifting on this. It could really help start to get the conversation going. My big concern, though, is there's no money. There's no money for the reinstallation of the buildings, which absolutely has to happen. 90%, 95% of all buildings will need to have a re-insulated cladding around them. They are not capable right now of converting to electrical heat. It can't be done. So there's that issue. And then there's the actual issue of, say, heat pumps. Can they work at altitude? Nobody knows. I can't believe it. The ignorance on this. We don't know whether you can bring a heat pump that will work down below up to 8,000 plus feet and that it will perform the way it does below. And we need to know this. So it's like we don't even know the basics yet. Okay, so I'll stop right there because it's like, wow, I don't think it's fair for us to float out some well-intended resolution that we all believe in if we don't know what we're talking about. And I don't feel that we do yet. So I'll stop right there. It's like, this is such a big deal. This really is the big enchilada. It really is. And when we've accomplished this one, the electrification part, on top of everything else, we will have our hard work done. We really will. But this is like a 10-year, 15-year conversion. And that's if we started right now with lots of money.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll stop right there. It's like I'm open to anything, but I just want to put how I feel on the table, which is like, whoa, let's be careful.
So I totally agree with you, Larry. When I think about it logically, I think there's a lot that still needs to be figured out, especially when we consider things like pellet stoves that aren't your typical propane gas, heating source, but they are efficient. And the jury's kind of still out on, is it better than converting to electric heat? And then the other major consideration for, I know a lot of folks in the Netherlands, is if we're all on electric heat, we can't be losing the power grid, right? We'll all be too cold if there's no power for 3 days and nobody has electricity. So I would also be hesitant to putting forward that goal. But then I also think back on when we passed the 100% renewable electricity goal, and we had the capstone group at that point that was helping us, map out our plan. And so when we passed the goal before we had the capstone group, but when we passed that goal, we didn't really have, the legislation was not in our favor. Nothing was in our favor. And it wasn't necessarily a realistic goal. But here we are, all of a sudden, at, the 10th hour, it's now realistic. And so I hear you. And I'm also, I guess I'm split on whether or not it's worthwhile to try to get a resolution passed, because I see both sides of it. We're having this goal and this resolution behind us to reach 100% really has driven momentum and change, and as well as us just foreseeing that the general atmosphere was going to move in the direction we wanted it to move. And I think with electrification, we can see that the general atmosphere is moving in that direction that we want it to. But I would agree with you, Larry, that I would love to see a capstone group come up with some figures and some data for us. For one, a baseline of how many houses are we trying to convert here? Is it 70%? Is it 80%? What does that look like? Before really being able to know what I could set as a goal. So I guess I'll end there. If any other folks have things to chime in on.
Yeah. So regarding, can you hear me?
Yes.
Regarding the resolutions, yeah, I think having a goal to strive for, right, you have to have it. And if you you know if you don't, you're not going to get anywhere close. But I think Larry is right. Yeah, the energy density of fossil fuels is just so great. We're losing a lot, obviously. This is why electric motors are so much better than internal combustion engines, is because it's exploding and you're losing a whole bunch of energy in the heat. But insulation is something you can do regardless, right? And even if you have a house, even if you have natural gas heating, you'll still benefit. You'll still burn less if you have the most up-to-date insulation. And then just one comment regarding losing power. I mean, yeah, we have to almost become our own grid. And this is something I chatted just briefly with Erica the other day. I don't know the ins and outs of the legal stranglehold that XL has here, but I mean, the end idea, right? That, for example, the company Tesla has, right, is to make the software so that houses, individual houses can have solar with power walls with batteries, so that at least those locations don't lose power, right? And you see all these stories of, hurricane locations that lose power, and then there's the house with the power wall. All the lights are still on. So but there is still that issue, is just elevation and winter up here, and I think it's very difficult. And yeah, I don't know of any numbers actually, because natural gas might just be, it might be really hard to get rid of natural gas at a elevation in a winter location like this. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't have some goals to increase all these other metrics.
Thanks, Cameron. Can I jump in real quick? I just put the registration link in the chat for the Crested Butte Electrification Code case study. So if you're interested in this, Crested Butte is leading the way, and CC4CA is going to highlight them. I believe it's early November, midday. But I will be there. I'm happy to report back to you all. And heat pumps are coming fast. And there are heat pumps in Crested Butte right now that are being researched and studied. And so we don't have the data yet, but they are in cold climates similar to ours, and they're working. We just don't have, again, the large scale numbers that have been published. So I just wanted to leave you guys with some optimism. Other thoughts and feedback? Sorry, you guys want to see my vicious? Here's my vicious chewing on my arm right now.
I think she's saying, Mommy, it's time to go.
Well, is there anything else, Erica, that you need from us or would like to update us on?
Yes. What is that? Pumpkins? It's like a pumpkin collage, Brian? I think, Brian, you need to come to all our meetings moving forward.
It looks like pumpkins drawn on with Sharpie.
It's brilliant. Okay, one last thing. Well, two things. I just wanted to say thanks to all of you for showing up on the 20th Community Solar Garden event. It was so fantastic to have most of you in a room together, and I was just so inspired for the turnout. We needed to get more folks to turn out, but definitely we had some solid SAB representation, so thank you. And the last piece I have is I'm going to be presenting on November 1st to the Board of Trustees. I've shared the presentation with a few of you, but right now it's just about 7 slides. And my goal is to really start with where is sustainability in Nederland, starting with 2004 and our environmental practices resolution, and then to where we are now with our energy efficiency. In between, I'm going to talk about our Envision 2020 and our Vision 2030, which very clearly supports sustainable development and environmental support. And then go into kind of how we landed with our coordinator position, which was a goal of the SAB board for a decade now. And some of the accomplishments Garrett did in his time with us, and then some of the things that I'm working on now. And I just want to share with you guys, I have 3 questions I'm going to ask at the end of this. And I would love to have you all, if you're available for this discussion. But the first one is, what does the future of sustainability look like in Nederland? What is the value of a collaborative sustainability role that is incorporated into relevant Nederland projects and goals? And how can sustainability be more integrated and hold more value in Nederland? And so the goal is to really kind of update new BOT members on some things that have already been done in the past, and then just really connect as far as what we're working on, what our priorities are right now, and then ask those questions of kind of where do we want to go with this. So if anybody has feedback or would like to see that presentation, I'd love to share with you and get your thoughts on it, things that maybe should be added that aren't in it now. And then if you're available on the 1st for the BOT meeting, it'd be great to have you. And if you'd like to also speak during the presentation, let me know. It'd be great to collaborate.
I plan on coming, and I'd be happy to speak.
Thanks, Larry. I'll connect with you. And I guess one last question is, do we want to move forward on the Go EV pledge? And do we want more information about an electrification pledge and some other communities that are doing it, or just one or the other? Just a like casual nod would be helpful, or
I would say yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
Yes, yes.
I think it's good to get more information about both of them.
Nicole, how about you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. That is all that I have. If you guys have any questions or comments about anything in the staff report or anything we talked about, please feel free to reach out. But it's great to see y'all.
Thank you, Erica, for your amazing update as always. So we need to schedule our November, and I put on here our December meeting date as well. As the 4th Thursday is Thanksgiving in November, and then the 4th Thursday in December or 20th. So starting with November, is there a certain day of the week, or do we want to go a week earlier? Does anybody have a particular sway?
You know, if we did it on Thanksgiving, it could get me a lot of cooking. So I think we should just keep it on that day. That was a joke.
I was laughing.
Yeah, we're all laughing.
Does anyone else have any?
Melanie, what have we done in the past?
Various things. We've done it earlier the week before on Thursday to do it before the ProSab meeting. We've done it on the Tuesday before. We've done it on the Monday before. We've done it on the Wednesday before.
Could I ask you, Melody, if you have a a day that works well for you?
No. I had another person tell me recently, busy people just get things done. So really, if we're planning ahead, I can fit on a fair. Generally, past boards have not wanted to do it on weekends. They wanted to keep it to weekdays. But I'm generally open for anything.
So I will say so a lot of boards have had to move their dates. And so I'm going to tell you, you're probably pretty limited to a Monday, just given the other boards. And so I'm just going to throw it out there. Your options are, so let me just give you 4 of them. Monday the 7th, Tuesday the 8th, but it is an election day, so caution there. Monday the 14th or Monday the 28th. You can also have Wednesday the 30th. I know, thanks, Brian. I'm like, I could give you a couple more, but I'm going to try to keep it to that. I would recommend you move to the Mondays because trying to move later in the week doesn't usually work.
I'm good with the 28th or 30th.
Yeah, I think folks have a lot of flexibility, so maybe the 28th works.
28th is great for me.
All right. So what's the time slot on the 28th? Does 6:45 work?
A lot of shaking heads. I don't know, Melody, if you can see everybody, but they're shaking heads. And thumbs up.
Yep, yes.
Okay. So our next meeting will be November 28th at 6:45 p.m., which is just a month and a day from now. And then December 22nd. How do people feel about that date? Which would be our regularly scheduled date.
We're not cooking.
I'm seeing thumbs up and I'm not hearing any objections to that date.
I'm gonna be actually out of town that day, but I don't know that I'm essential. So,
Well,
and
we need at least
normally I
4.
could call in from out of town, but I'm gonna be in Vegas. So probably not.
It'll be
And
loud.
actually, I think I have tickets to Rich Little at the time that we're gonna have the meeting.
Fun.
So no, I'm not, but do it without me, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll check in with Alan and Chris and see how they feel about the December date. If we need to revisit it next month, we will. Otherwise, we'll tentatively slate that as the normal meeting date. And then the next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes for June, July, August, and September, which we did get into the drive, and things are going smoothly now where we can get the minutes up into the drive. So does anybody have any questions? Do they not want to approve the minutes yet? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion to approve. From somebody that's been on the board for these minutes to have happened.
I make a motion that we approve those minutes.
Thank you, Rich. And I will second that motion. And we will take a vote. So myself is a yes. Larry?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Sorry, you just broke up. You might have said my name.
I did.
Okay, yes.
Perfect. And Nicole, I suppose I can ask you to vote on these.
Yes.
And those minutes are approved. And is there anything else final before we adjourn the meeting?
I have one last thing, Melody. The Geo Solar Neighborhood Tour is tomorrow. So if anyone has any last minute availability to join us, I think Larry and I are going to carpool from Town Hall at 11:15. So we'll take notes and share with you all maybe some photos as well.
Yes, please. I'm so sad to miss that.
This is a trip to the future.
I know, Larry. Like I was hoping to get on the ship. Bummer. But no, please take lots of pictures. I'd greatly appreciate that.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will
And-
adjourn the meeting. Yep.
Oh, Melody, one last thing. The Nederland International Film Festival is going to be showcasing Rich on November 5th. So
I think showcasing is an exaggeration, but
and the Nederland Film Festival is put on by some awesome, amazing people that we should support. And there's a lot of great films that are going to be played there. So please go.
Rich, when are your films going to be shown?
oh, hang on, I can pull that up. I don't have that memorized. It is an all-day thing. I think one of them is early and one of them is in the early afternoon.
will you send us the times in an email so we can remember?
Yeah, I can see. So one is going to be roughly, I don't know, 10:45, 11 o'clock. And then one is going to be about 4:45 p.m. if the schedule holds up. I've never been to this film festival. Some of the ones I've been to in the past, the schedule does not necessarily hold up. So. And if you are interested, I will put a link to the schedule, if I can figure out how to do that, in the chat. There you go. So.
Yeah, and I just emailed the link to Erica too.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. We're gonna have to show up with our like fan club, Rich Armin fan club shirts on.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you all. And we can adjourn the meeting at 9:03 p.m. It was another great meeting full of wonderful ideas. I'm always inspired when I come here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Melody.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Brian.
Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you.